Our lead story tonight, well, as cases in India are near a 2-year low, this is the time for booster shots. And now, booster or precaution doses, as the government calls them, will be available to all adults above 18 from Sunday. But the catch is, these are paid and they will only be available at private vaccination centres. Booster doses so far have been given only for health workers and the 60-plus age group. They've been available both at private centres for a cost and at government centres for free. Over 2.4 crore booster precaution doses have been given so far. This, however, means that unlike the earlier booster shots announced for healthcare workers, frontline staff and those above 60, the third jab won't be free for most adults because these will be paid booster shots. However, the prices are of course controlled, and Covishield, for instance, will be available at 600 rupees plus taxes. This comes at a time when infections are rising in many countries like China and the UK, and some Indians are finding it hard to travel abroad without a third dose. Here are the reactions coming into this decision.
After demands by many health experts for many months, the Indian government has finally cleared booster shots, or precaution doses as it calls them, but with conditions. It's only for those above 18 years old, and there must be a 9-month gap after the second dose, and it's not free. In some other countries, the gap is as little as 4 weeks. Doctors have welcomed the move, so are those keen to take the precaution dose.
These are pragmatic decisions which are being taken by experts, but yes, long awaited and certainly a most useful decision.
Definitely a welcome move to have opened up the booster dose for the entire adult population. It reduces the risk of hospitalizations and the death rate.
Anil Kumar is a 23-year-old migrant worker from Bihar working at a roadside eatery in Hyderabad. He says he took the first and second dose of COVID vaccine that came free of cost, but he cannot afford to pay for the precaution dose.
मैं पैसे नहीं दे सकता हूँ और पैसे से नहीं ले सकता हूँ. अगर जो गवर्नमेंट दिए तो मैं फ्री में ले सकता हूँ.
37-year-old Mantu Yadav also says paying for a vaccine will cut into the rations for his children back home.
इतना वैक्सीन लगा के पैसे लेके नहीं ले सकता हूँ. ठीक है, हम लोग कमाने खाने वाला आदमी हूँ. 200-300 रुपए महीने का आ रहा है डेली का.
For most, the COVID scare is over, so spending on a precaution dose is not a priority.
Now corona is eradicated, so people are fearless now.
हमें तो ये मिडिल क्लास लोग हैं ना, इतना पैसा नहीं दे सकते हैं, इसलिए गवर्नमेंट में भी प्रेफर करेंगे हम.
गवर्नमेंट देंगे तो जाने की
जाएंगे लेकिन.
India's vaccine policy has already seen a series of flip-flops. For those for who earnings are barely enough to meet necessities, precaution dose is clearly not going to be a priority. If the government wants everyone covered, they may have to make precaution doses free, at least for that segment. With camera person Nagaraju, Uma Sudhir, NDTV.
If you want to take your booster dose, it will be paid for. Would you still take it?
Of course I would take it. It's for my own safety.
For booster I'm waiting because 9 months had not completed, so I'm waiting for the booster. Yeah.
And you will also take your booster dose?
Yeah, I'll take it. Yeah.
All right. And ma'am, you said you're 14 and you've just taken your first dose, right? Or second dose? You're going to take your first dose. But, would you feel safer going to school if once you've completed both your doses?
Yes, I would feel safe when I take both the doses.
So those are reactions coming in. Doctors have also welcomed this, and the head of the Serum Institute of India, Adar Poonawalla, which of course Covishield is the majority of vaccines that have been given in India, said that this was a crucial and timely decision by the government. He also said Covovax will soon be cleared for even children as young as 3.
This was very crucial and a very timely decision by the government of India, because a lot of people who want to travel were finding it difficult as countries have put restrictions on having boosters for entry and to enter restaurants and other things. So this is going to be very useful from the 10th of April. As far as Covishield is concerned and Covovax, both are approved by the regulator. Covishield is approved as a booster. Covovax eventually will be approved as a booster and will be at 900 rupees on the CoWIN app. Covishield will remain at 600 rupees. But it's important to add that we will be offering large discounts to this so that hospitals and distributors can have and earn a margin whilst they sell this product. The final customer or consumer will still have to pay 600 rupees for Covishield plus taxes and 900 rupees for Covovax plus tax. Covovax is approved by the regulator. It's a formality now where the NTTV committee has to meet and adopt it onto the CoWIN app so that you can get a certificate and use it for children over the age of 12. Covovax as a booster will probably be available a bit later on, as that has other discussions. The NTTV has to look at some of the other data for the booster for Covovax. But we leave it to the experts to decide that. The first thing will be that Covovax will be approved for children for dose 1 and dose 2 over the age of 12. And then followed by lower age groups all the way down to 3. But that will happen, in the coming months.
So let's just look at the latest COVID numbers. Well, daily new cases remain just around 1,000. Now, remember, this is a 2-year low, so that's good news. However, there's a slight increase with 1,109. That's up just over 7%. The deaths in the last 24 hours at 43, no change. The positivity is 0.24, but that's up. And the tests are down 6.27%. But there are some signs of worry coming from some states. The centers today wrote to 5 states, Kerala, Delhi, Haryana, Maharashtra and Mizoram, because of the first indication of a rise in positivity rates. For instance, in Kerala, 2,321 new COVID cases last week. So the health secretary writing to Kerala about that. Also, if you just look at the Delhi numbers, the highest cases in Delhi in the last 4 weeks coming out. So it's 176 cases in Delhi. Now that doesn't look very much at all at the moment, but the daily average has risen about 15% compared to a week ago. And if you look at the Delhi COVID reproduction number, that's above the 1.0 mark. That's important because it indicates a rise of cases. Now again, this comes as masks are not compulsory anymore, and the good news is that the recent surges of COVID haven't had very strong symptoms. However, it is of course something we should still watch out for and take responsibility for our safety. Well, the other big headline, as fuel inflation is hitting record highs, the Reserve Bank decided to hold steady with its lending rates. It hasn't changed it in a bid to control inflation, even though that means that the growth may actually be curbed a bit. And in fact, the RBI today cut the GDP forecast slightly and also raised the inflation forecast. It's nearly at what they say is their comfort zone of 6%. So why is this happening? The RBI governor said after the pandemic, when we saw the effect of COVID receding, the big worry is now the global geopolitical crisis.
The sky today may be overcast with clouds, but we will use all our energies, resolve and resources to let the sunlight illuminate India's future. I don't think the RBI is...
The RBI governor looking for silver linings, but the numbers he listed paint a gloomy picture.
The RBI has cut its GDP forecast to 7.2%, down from 7.8%, which was projected earlier. The central bank said the forecast is down as the positive benefits it expected from the receding Omicron wave have been offset by sharp geopolitical tensions. In the second major announcement, the RBI has sharply raised its inflation forecast to 5.7% from 4.5% earlier. Explaining this, the RBI said supply disruptions have rattled global markets, pushing up the prices of oil, gas and other commodities. The RBI is now assuming crude oil prices to be at $100 per barrel for this year, up from the earlier budgeted price of $75. And lastly, the interest rate has remained unchanged for the 11th time in a row and still stands at its 19-year low of 4%. The rate is kept steady because even though economic activity is recovering, it is barely above pre-pandemic levels. The RBI stood by its accommodative stance it has maintained since the pandemic to support growth. But interestingly, the RBI governor did say the bank is now focusing on withdrawal of this accommodation to ensure inflation remains within target. This is being seen as a signal for interest rate hikes in the next few policies.
All that has happened all around the world has introduced a completely new element into the scheme of things. So therefore, we have revised the inflation projections, and I have said that we are ready to take whatever action is required.
Inflation at 5.7% is pushing the RBI's comfort limit of 6%. And while food inflation contributed the most, the central bank expects no major flare-up in grain prices. Inflation will depend on the geopolitical situation, it said. Manufacturers, however, expect higher input and output price pressures.
But on a more
the RBI also said that in a gradual and calibrated manner, it will withdraw rupees 8.5 lakh crore of liquidity from the system beginning this year over a multi-year time frame in a non-disruptive manner.
Work out a real rate of interest. There is not enough.
The focus of this monetary policy has been global volatility caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The first monetary policy of the year has tried to address the challenges the economy will face in the days to come as a result of what the RBI governor describes as tectonic shifts. With Priyanshi Sharma and Sakshi Bajaj in New Delhi, Saurabh Gupta, NDTV.
And the markets also up after that, the Sensex surging over 400 points with that RBI policy. Meanwhile, in a major decision, especially to tackle malnutrition amongst children, the cabinet has approved the distribution of fortified rice across government schemes. The Prime Minister announced this fortification in his Independence Day speech. The entire cost of the rice fortification, which is around 2,700 crores per annum, will be paid for by the government. The scheme is to ensure essential nutrients, especially for malnourished women and children. Well, what exactly is happening in Pakistan? The countdown has begun to the vote of confidence for Imran Khan. Today, there was a cabinet meeting which Imran Khan attended. After that, it was briefed by his minister, Fawad Chaudhry, who said the Supreme Court decision actually threatened the independence of Parliament. He also said that the evidence of a plan of a foreign hand for regime change attempt will be placed before the National Assembly. Imran Khan is scheduled to address Pakistan at 10 o'clock Indian time tonight. Let's go across now live to our exclusive guest, Mr. Hussain Haqqani, the Director for South and Central Asia at the Hudson Institute. He's also been the Pakistan Ambassador to the United States from 2008 to 2011, an academic and political analyst of affairs in South Asia, especially Pakistan. Mr. Haqqani, so the countdown beginning for Imran Khan's most crucial match. Is his exit now inevitable, or are we still going to see some surprise being sprung in Pakistan's volatile politics?
The match ended quite a while ago. He's just run off with the wickets and the bails, and you guys are still referring to him as somebody who's still on the pitch and talking about this as a match. Look, Pakistan has a written constitution. The written constitution explicitly says that the Prime Minister, once he faces a vote of no confidence, cannot dissolve Parliament. He did that. The Supreme Court intervened and said, this is what the constitution says, you can't do it. Now turning around and says we don't accept the Supreme Court, etc., is just like crying after the match. The match is over. He will create problems. He will create problems because he would rather be dragged out than be removed from office. But none of that is eventually going to work for the simple reason that he has lost the majority in Parliament, which is the basis for becoming Prime Minister in a parliamentary democracy.
Has he also lost the support of the army, crucially? And we saw in an interview he gave to PTV just a short while ago, he again stressed his role as upholding Islam and fighting against Islamophobia. So also reaching out.
So one gentleman, one gentleman who wanted to uphold Islam, as you know, today finally got awarded a punishment for 31 years in prison. Look, Pakistan went through a phase in which people could invoke Islam and forget about the constitution and the law. There is at least an effort going on right now to try and bring Pakistan back on the rails. And very frankly, a lot of people in Pakistan would like Pakistan to be run according to the constitution. As far as the military is concerned, the military is saying that it wants to support the constitution. And so far, there is no evidence that they have played any overt role in the political machinations. Those things need to be acknowledged.
Interestingly, of course, Imran Khan's ministers today said after that cabinet meeting that they want a judicial commission, and in fact cited the whole memo gate where where you were really the center of that controversy about that US memo, so-called memo, which is written by you. Of course, later on, the commission said they had no actual evidence of this, but this whole memo gate now with this long shadows of this foreign hand. We've seen this foreign hand often emerging whenever someone is toppled in democracies.
So you might remember, or you might be too young to remember, I'm old enough to remember, when in India, Mrs. Indira Gandhi used to talk about the foreign hand so much that it became a joke that the Congress's election symbol, the hand, was actually about the foreign hand. Basically, Pakistan's economy is failing under Imran Khan. He has been an absolute disaster. He was a cricket player who should have stuck to his own field. He came into politics, and there he has changed his stance on a number of things, a liberal one day, an Islamist the next. He has a cult following, there is no doubt about it. But the fact of the matter is that even the commission they tried to create was so clumsy. It wasn't a judicial commission because it wasn't under the Judicial Commissions Act, and there was no judicial representative. They nominated a retired lieutenant general to head it. And that lieutenant general has now declined to head it. So basically, these are gimmicks. These are gimmicks to stay in the headlines until the last moment. When he says he wants to play until the last ball, what he really means is he will continue to spin something until the last moment when he is removed from office, and he will still be crying that no, I really didn't get removed. But parliamentary democracy is simple. You lose support in parliament, you lose office, period.
But of course, Mr. Haqqani, one point that he keeps raising and is about the opposition coalition that has been cobbled together against him. How stable is that going to be, considering the diverse elements it brings together for both the Bhutto family, the Sharif family? How stable is this actually going to be? And of course, the Nawaz Sharif's role exiled in London currently.
Well, former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, of course, was removed through a judicial process himself. And without a vote in parliament, his party had an absolute majority in parliament. He was unjustly and justifiably removed at that time. But he accepted the judicial decision. He went to prison. So he has really redeemed himself that way, and he will definitely be a major influence. How stable will a coalition be? Look, Imran Khan's government was a coalition government in which his party was the single biggest party, but there were three small parties, and it is the defection of those small parties that resulted in the fall of his government. So coalition governments are never completely stable. There will be problems ahead. Furthermore, Pakistan's economy, Pakistan's foreign relations, everything is in such a bad state that right now, whoever comes into office will have to deal with the fallout of all of that. A rupee that has eroded in value significantly, an international relations crisis in which the outgoing Prime Minister is accusing Pakistan's largest export market, the United States, and its government of conspiring against him without evidence. A lot of hostility towards India expressed by Imran Khan. All of those things will be problems. But let us be honest, they will be problems about which people will at least try to find solutions. Imran Khan's problem was he always stated the problems and in the end always said the solution to all problems is me. In his last speech, he used the word me or I 126 times. So a person like that going is something a lot of people will find relief in.
But Mr. Haqqani, of course, you mentioned India, and the relations between India and Pakistan have changed dramatically in the last 7 years, as it were. And of course, for the situation in Afghanistan and the Taliban government taking over. So it's a very volatile situation for India, looking at both what's currently happening in Pakistan and Afghanistan. And in India, the view was always that Imran Khan was the army's puppet. Will that be different with this, with the coalition government, which will be weak in numbers? Do you think perhaps that early elections is the best way out? Let the people
eventually
speak.
there will be elections. I don't know whether they will be in 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, or a year. Pakistan will need elections. And I think the opposition parties agreed on the fact. And Mr. Nawaz Sharif has been very firm that there should be an election. So has Mr. Bilawal Bhutto Zardari of the Pakistan People's Party and Maulana Fazlur Rahman of the JUI. So there will be an election. There will be, and that will be the solution to Pakistan's domestic crisis. As far as relations with other countries are concerned, look, unfortunately, Pakistan has had a rather fixed paradigm about foreign relations. I am not too sure that that will change under a new government. But if it does, it will be a positive thing. Pakistan needs good relations with India. It needs positive relations with China. It also needs to have a good relationship with the United States, and it needs to focus on building its economy instead of pretending to be a great power.
How can Pakistan throw off the tag it has of a failed state? And especially, you mentioned also that Pakistan caught judgment on Hafiz Saeed. For India and, of course, other countries, the United States also, when it talks about terror emanating from Pakistan, is that will this court judgment actually be carried out in any meaningful way on the ground, or will it be again some kind of house arrest complete whitewash?
I have no idea how it will be implemented. I'm not physically there. In the past, unfortunately, such decisions have been announced and not fully implemented, which has always come to harm Pakistan. I personally believe that it would be in Pakistan's interest to carry out the sentence. It will be in Pakistan's interest to do everything that it has promised the international community. And it will be in Pakistan's interest to put all this episode of jihadi extremism behind, move forward into the 21st century like a 21st century nation. Let us hope that that happens. And if it doesn't, well, people like myself have had a long history of criticizing it. We will continue to critique it moving forward.
Mr. Haqqani, thanks very much for your perspective. Somebody who's really seen the various governments through, from the Sharif government to the Bhutto government, the Imran Khan government from the United States. But let's see now which the next government in Pakistan will actually emerge tomorrow. Thanks so much for joining me. Let's go across now to the other really horrific story emerging, and this is out of Ukraine. First, those visuals of body bags lying on the streets near Kyiv, the capital. The United Nations showed that video by the president, Mr. Zelensky, and then the visuals emerging as relief forces actually go in. And today, once again, the horrors of war as a train station in eastern Ukraine was bombed. At least 30 people were killed. So those visuals, I must warn you, are disturbing, of bodies just lying on the streets. Russia has denied that its missiles were involved. Ukraine said this is just Russia's shifting tactics again.
At least 35 people were killed and over 100 were wounded in a Russian rocket strike at a railway station in the eastern part of Ukraine today. As civilians were trying to flee, thousands of people were reportedly at the station at the time.
Підрозділи окупаційних військ зосереджують зусилля на взятті під контроль населених пунктів Попасна, Рубіжне та встановленні контролю над містом Маріуполь. Продовжують ведення штурмових дій на більшості напрямків. Ворог не перестає завдавати авіаційних ударів та вести обстріли цивільної інфраструктури, зокрема й із застосуванням реактивних систем залпового вогню.
This comes at a time where the United Kingdom's Defense Ministry has said Russia has completely withdrawn forces from the north. But it seems to be stepping up its attack in the eastern part of Ukraine, especially in the Donbas region, with residents taking shelter in basements during an overnight attack. Ukraine officials believe Russian forces are preparing for a massive breakthrough attempt in Donbas. And a Kremlin spokesperson hinted that the war might be over in the foreseeable future.
Our military are doing their best to bring an end to that operation. And we do hope that in coming days, in foreseeable future, this operation will reach its goals or will finish it by the negotiations between Russian and Ukrainian delegation.
But chilling scenes in the northern regions where Russian soldiers have withdrawn, the bodies of Ukrainians killed in the fighting have been recovered from the streets, from homes. Ukraine appealed to NATO for more weapons in its fight against Russia to help prevent further atrocities like those reported in the city of Bucha, and urged Germany to stash red tape so that more supplies can get in. The Czech Republic is reportedly sending tanks and infantry fighting vehicles to Ukraine. The United States has committed thousands more weapons to Ukraine, including anti-armor systems and suicide drones. From what seemed to be the beginning of the end, the war at the moment is far from over. This is Divya Wadhwa for NDTV.